Hello, this is Tim Hellman.
And I'm Frank Eugene Hall.
And this is Movie Talk. Today we're going to review the movie 12 Years a Slave. 12 Years a Slave is now the top contender for Best Picture at this year's Academy Awards. It's about a free black man named Solomon Northup who was kidnapped and sold into slavery in 1841, Washington, D.C. He spent 12 years working on Louisiana plantations before he was freed. The film is based on the 1853 autobiography of the same name by Solomon Northup and was written by John Ridley. It was directed by Steve McQueen and stars Chiwetel Ejiofor, Michael Fassbender, Benedict Cumberbatch, Lupita Nyong'o, Paul Dano, Paul Giamatti, Sarah Paulson, and Brad Pitt, who also is one of the film's producers. So what did you think of the movie?
Well, as you listen to those names being read off, there's obviously some diversity involved in this cast.
Oh, yeah.
And the main thing that struck me about the movie, having grown up in the South, is that it is a great metaphor of, it uses the swamp throughout the movie as a surrounding metaphor. And racism and our racial history, the history of slavery, in some ways is a quagmire for America. And having a movie explore that in such vivid, visceral style, I think is healthy for us. It's maybe a little hard for whites to see it. I've got to believe, I'm not black, but
it's probably hard for blacks to see too.
You know, if I were black, I don't know how I would react to the movie. I have a feeling it would just be a visceral feeling as well to think of how my ancestors would have been treated by the ancestors of the whites around me. It really is a fairly brutal movie.
Oh, yeah.
So I grew up in the South, so this movie was very hard for me. I have a hard time using the N-word. This movie was filled with the N-word.
You have a hard time hearing it. You shouldn't.
I have a hard time.
You shouldn't want to have an easy time using the word.
Yes, right. But you know, to talk about the movie and to talk about the things that went on, you almost you will find times when it would make sense to use the N-word. I just have a hard time with that. Yeah. And having grown up in the South, I can remember when I was a boy being in a public park and using the kid drinking fountain because the adult fountain was too high. There was a little kid drinking fountain. And I remember, I must have been maybe 3 or 4, very, very young. Another little boy my age wanted to use the fountain that I had just used, but he was black. And his parents told him, no, you can't use that. You have to use this fountain over here. And there was the colored fountain. And there was no kids' fountain for the coloreds. It was just the adult fountain. And this little boy couldn't reach that adult fountain. And he couldn't use the kids' fountain because he was black. And I remember looking him in the eye, like wondering what's going on here with these adults, and him looking at me, and we were wondering what's the difference between us, why. And that was dawning on me.
Kids never understand.
We didn't understand. I didn't understand why you couldn't use the fountain.
That's something you're taught, not something you're born with, really.
Yeah, and so this was
discriminate against others.
You know, this was in the. I was growing up in around 1960, a little before, and so this was very real. And you can still see in the South, if you know what you're looking at, filling stations that have 3 bathrooms. The ladies, because ladies first, women, the men's bathroom, and then colored, the 3rd bathroom, as if they weren't women or men. And they're still there, and they don't use the 3rd bathroom now. It's like for storage and so on. But just this racism that was so vivid not that long ago. One of the themes in this movie is how blacks are not to be educated. If you are a black and you show that you have education, your life is in danger.
A lot of people still think that racism is still really strong today.
But you know, as a white, and you as a white, do we experience racism?
Not racism.
Right. I mean, we don't think it's present. But if we were black,
because I see it done to other people, and in the media and in politics, you see a lot of racism, especially with our president being black. And recent incidents with a kid getting shot and
Trayvon Martin.
How his death isn't as important as a white kid's death, obviously, is the way it's seen.
Whites may find this an uncomfortable movie, and blacks must certainly find this an uncomfortable movie. All Americans, I think, should see this movie.
Yeah. So a lot of people have problems with Hollywood making movies about slavery and racism from our past because they think it's exploitative and it's white guilt tripping. But it's history. You don't hear people complaining about movies about the Holocaust as much. I mean, Schindler's List and things like that.
Yeah, because that's those guys. That wasn't us.
Yeah, it was Germans. Yeah. And also, there's not as much
there's no racism
discrimination against Jews as much as the issue is with African Americans is a much larger topic, I think, than in modern times than as with Jews, I think.
Well, it's always risky in a society to guilt trip the dominant power. And it's easy to see how society wants to forget that. And when they have to be reminded of it, it's difficult. But that's, I think, part of the power of this movie and the value of this movie.
Why it's a really important film.
Yeah.
I think it's just as good, if not better, than Schindler's List for me.
That's an interesting point.
Yeah.
Interesting point.
Very similar subject matter, because slavery in America was a lot like the Holocaust for the Jews in Germany. Similar treatment.
Ouch.
Ouch. You don't think so?
You're right. You're right.
It's the same crime, basically. I
mean, and for me, I had relatives on the south and ancestors in the north. In fact, I had ancestors shooting at each other at the Battle of Atlanta. I had Georgia ancestors that owned slaves, and in their family cemetery plot, there's places where some slaves were buried. I just have a history in my family that to think of this as a parallel to the Holocaust is very haunting and very difficult. So, what do you rate this movie as?
I'd give it 5 stars out of 5 just because it was so powerful and it stayed with me for so long.
I also give it a 5 star out of 5 because it stuck with me. It stirred my soul. It did more for me than most movies do. It's not just a simple entertainment movie. It's an artful, philosophical work that's trying to get you to think.